All right, we'll just wait for a few people to join. We may have some issue with all of the ice and people's power, but we should be able to reach quorum. So welcome, Mike. It took me a second to parse your screen name, and then I'm like, oh, that's Mr. Dubman. So very good.
Hey guys, yeah, sorry, I'll change the name for the next time.
No, it's okay. It's okay now.
Okay.
Now I've got it, so it's perfectly fine. It just took me a moment to connect the dots. So I believe we need 2 more to join to hit quorum. Isn't that correct, Sridhar?
Yeah, actually, one should be enough.
Oh, 1 more? Okay. And we have VinCat, so we can at least verify that we're ready for the board meeting and get a status update on lab. And then we can have the discussion on projects engagement, which bleeds over into maintainers roster. And then I want feedback on what you got. So there was discussion in the use case group and a discussion on what would constitute a useful first release. We're sort of hitting the point where we need to think about defining that. I don't want to try to define it today or make a concrete proposal today, but the people on this call have a lot of knowledge and exposure to customers and use cases, and DPU vendors are here. So having getting some sense of what a useful release would be as part of technical steering, right? What do we want to steer our working groups towards is important. I believe we do need one more person to officially run the agenda. And what's our time limit, Sridhar, before we declare the ice storms beat us?
So we can start now. When once it comes to any voting or anything or approval, then at that time we can see if we have a quorum and continue.
Okay. All right. Yeah, we don't have anything to vote upon today.
Then we can just continue and mention that no quorum was achieved.
All right, so we'll say. All right, so the only announcement I have is that the SNEA DPU SIG Special Interest Group was formed last week on January 24th. And the SNEA XPU task force is dissolved. So SNEA has switched to using DPU terminology throughout. And the SNEA face-to-face meeting, SNEA board agreed to form a special interest group. Okay, and I have, I have a lot of info. I have, the full sort of slide deck and so on from that. But we'll let that thing finish forming up. The main
Explain the rationale and those changes that SNEA made.
So the rationale for using DPU is that that's the common terminology. I'll just show you actually, here, let me just give you a second and I'll just share. I'll just show you what was going through. I wasn't able to attend the meeting. I had a medical thing for my family to take care of, so I was not able to go to the meeting. Can we invite? We can once the election occurs or the volunteering occurs. It's not so much an election, it's more of they have to browbeat someone into it, and it'll probably be 2 people as co-chairs. Give me a second. Sure. So I'll just show you that just so that you're aware. So these are the people that were there. You should recognize a number of the names. Not really much overlap with this group. Like I said, I was supposed to be there, but circumstances prevented it. There were no nominations for chair, co-chair. We'll see where that ends up. It'll probably get resolved within a week. Marty Fulton is, if you don't know who she is, she does a number of program management things for SNEA, and she would be doing the program management for this. And then here's the mission statement and objectives. So this is basically models and specifications and evangelism group, an education group. Not so much we're going to go, develop APIs and things like that. In fact, they don't want to because of the existence of OPI.
Yeah, the last bullet mentions coordinating with OPI.
That's correct. And again, we've already coordinated with the previous group, which was the XPU task force. And you can see the kind of projects. I won't read them to you. You guys can read faster than I can read it out loud to you. If there are questions, put them on Slack or send them on the mailing list and we can route them to SNEA, or just send them to me directly. And then they had an event list that SNE is already involved in that I think that they were looking at. All right. So any questions or discussion? We can also have a discussion here. We do have quorum. Actually, Stephen joined.
Yeah, I just found it interesting. We had a discussion about using the term XPU several months ago and had sort of backed away from that. I find it interesting that they finally went all in on DPU.
That's correct. And there are reasons for that. So we had that argument. We went through the pros and cons of the various terminology, and finally it got through that DPU was the best terminology, and the fact that OPI uses is by and large using DPU everywhere helped influence them. Yeah, so we influenced them.
Yeah, although I've noticed in some of our recent pull requests, XPU is being used.
Correct. I've noticed that as well.
So we should settle on just using the term DPU throughout. IPDK will likely use the term IPU in many places, and I think that's okay, but or DPU/IPU. I think we should just do what SNEA did and finally just settle on the term DPU for these devices. A lot of code with XPU.
Is that something that TSC needs to vote on, or is that just a convention
I don't know. I mean, do we have to vote on it? Yeah, I guess we do. So pros and cons. I mean, a mix of terms is probably the worst thing. So, and we don't tend to use XPU other than when we're trying to be what I would call
Egalitarian.
or formally correct. Egalitarian, I don't know. I mean, we use the term XPU. I mean, it's just terminology. We just have to pick one and run with it. If SNEA is going to decide on DPU and we decide on DPU, then everyone will use DPU.
Yeah, I mean, you're making a decision. We are making a decision that will help drive what the rest of the industry eventually lands on, right?
That's right.
Steven's got his hand up.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to mention that we had talked about XPU and actually explicitly rejected using XPU because XPU implies more than DPU and IPU. It could be GPU or other things, and that's not what we're covering here. So we had explicitly moved away from XPU. So I'm a little disturbed that we've let XPU seep back in.
Well, I think it was early on there was code with XPU in it, so there would have to be some, that code would have to change.
Okay.
I mean, no one's using this code in any significant way yet, right? So it's not. If we're going to change, it's time to change now.
Yeah, I would support a move towards DPU and revisit, cleaning up all the code and just locking in on the term DPU.
But Boris is right. Rob is not here to advocate for IPU to DPU/IPU like we landed on last time.
Maybe it's a discussion we could schedule for next week.
Sure. I'll put that as a note. Yeah, I mean, DPU/IPU is awkward.
Yes.
One straightforward acronym that's descriptive is better. Which is why, for example, Dell tends to use the term DPU throughout now. And because of the confusion of SmartNIC, we stay away from that. SNEA, again, came to the term DPU because XPU was even more confusing, and SmartNIC has legacy associations, and not everyone agrees that a SmartNIC is a DPU. Packet pushers were using the term DPU. Everyone is tending to gravitate towards the use of that term, and so we should. I believe we should as well in OPI as a formal outcome. We should say we're using the term DPU. It'll be that way throughout the code. Full stop. Other thoughts?
Yeah, so
Go ahead.
Okay, I'll just go ahead, not raising the hand. If maybe if we end up adding GPU based use cases, some of them we are discussing with ION, then maybe at that time considering XPU might make sense. Then you have a data processing, you have infrastructure offload, then you have GPUs, and what else is needed to get to XPU. I understand why we call DPU when you have a storage, because it's more data processing. So maybe it is still rational to for OPI to use XPU at certain point, and then while SNIA continues to use DPUs.
No, so we're not defining standards for GPUs. So I don't think we need an umbrella term. I think that would be more confusing rather than less. And especially if we use mixed terminology. What am I missing, Venkat? Because again, talking about combining DPU plus GPU into solutions, that's excellent. But the terminology I don't get in terms of what, because again, what we're chartered with is building up, use cases, APIs, lifecycle and provisioning, and developer platform for DPUs, for a class of devices that we're going to use the term DPU for. What am I missing?
I thought we explicitly added even GPU into some of our slides where we said AIML use cases will also be considered, even though we might not have made as much progress.
So GPUs will have, GPUs have APIs, and the solutions can have GPUs plus DPUs in them for sure. All right. Okay. So we'll continue the discussion next week. Alad and then Renato.
I think that as both a sales guy and somebody who deals with a lot of marketing in this field, I tend to agree that initially, at least, DPU is the right acronym. Now, Intel decided to call theirs IPU, and we respect that, so it's DPU IPU. I think anything beyond that will be very confusing because that's what this group is focused on, only that type of device. If we call it anything else, it would sound like we're working with other types of devices. We've had this discussion multiple times, and that's what we've landed on. So I don't know what brought this up again, but to Venkat's point, we're not programming, as Joe said, we're not programming the GPU. All we're doing is hopefully building APIs to explain how data would move or our application would treat the DPU when considering the next in line is a GPU or another type of processing device. So we shouldn't address that because we're not writing in CUDA or Python. We're actually preparing APIs to go on the DPU.
Right, exactly. Renato?
Yes, I was just going to say Dash is using DPU, and I think that makes the case for communications and networking being part of data processing.
I agree Dash is using DPU as well, which is another reason for us to use it. Make your second point a little more verbosely, explain it a little more.
No, my only point is that just because it says data doesn't mean it's a storage unit. I mean, networking is all about transferring data from one, source to another.
Oh, absolutely. No, oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah, no. DPU is a general descriptive term for the kinds of processing that's done in this class of device. I mean, it really is the best term, and it doesn't overlap with a lot of other. There aren't a lot of uses of the TLA DPU out there to cause confusion, at least not within the computer industry. So it's a good term from that point of view. And again, if I'm doing tunnel termination, if I'm doing firewall, if I'm doing data movement engine, like third-party copy equivalent, if I'm doing flow processing, I mean, all of those things fall under data processing unit. And really, you should think of it as data flow processing unit, right? And those are all data flows, and but data processing unit is sufficient. Yeah, and Tim's right. So SNIA, so I guess you missed that a lot. So SNIA has formed the DPU SIG, and they explicitly use the term DPU, where SNIA before was using XPU and had the XPU task force. SNIA has settled on a DPU for the terminology. All right, so I think we probably do need to vote on this. I'll set it as the agenda for next week to have additional discussion and vote on this. And by that time, we may know a bit more about the membership and structure of the DPU SIG at SNIA. Okay. Let's go back to our, all right. Venkat, are we ready to go in front of the board with the lab discussion?
Not right now, but we will be by next week. So I'll give a quick update. We are supposed to have, I think I just checked the BOM as well as operating procedures are officially merged. There were some small issues with signing of code and whatnot, but that's in. So that means we have 2 documents that we can give to vendors so that they have something official to look at and give an official quote back to us, right? In terms of who are all the vendors, we have UNH, Tech Mahindra, U&V, a new company also has reached out called Sarvana. So we have 4 of them who we will reach out to today because we have checked in code which is all merged and that makes it official. We figured that SNIA and SNIA labs may not be an option, so we won't pursue that.
It's not in the budget anymore. So it was in the budget last year, but it's not in the budget anymore. So it was shut down. It was shut down. I guess it glided down over the last year, and it's finally gone. Yeah.
So we won't pursue that. So then we have 4 of them. And in terms of next steps, once we send it to them, what we need for the board, which we will present next. I mean, we have to review those slides that we present on 13th to board in the next meeting, or even before that, maybe we just send an email and then can look at it earlier.
We should do a review, put together what you're going to present, and we should at least do a quick review so that people know what's going to be said, and we'll do a quick review. And again,
so I just want to, so what it would contain is the budget that is required for a board approval, a date for provider selection, a date for when we might ship the equipment, and then a date when, because there are all these delays in all this supply chain whatnot, an estimated date when the lab will be in production. So it's the money and some kind of execution timeline with these dates is what will get presented. So it may not be a lot of things, but it will be this. If we may not have the quotes back from all the vendors and have a detailed discussion in the board, I presume this is something that we may have to do offline and then bring it to TSC and then go back to board again one more time saying, hey, this is what we selected. That's all I have.
Right. And so, right. So if we have the structure, the vendors we're engaged with, the phased cost, and commitment dates in front of the board, then I think we've done what we need to do.
Yeah.
Anybody have questions or additional input for Venkat on this subject? Okay. Next subject. So project engagement. So I see improvements in both the API and lifecycle groups, again, with proposals and technical discussions. Yeah, we can do that. We can do that, Boris. We should have a markdown file explaining the reasoning. Let me take a note on that. Okay, so I see improvements in the working groups. I see improvement, we see some contributions from member companies, and we have promises for additional commitment, which I won't call people out, but there are promises for additional commitment. And I have promises for additional concrete proposals for direction. In addition, we've been going back and forth on what really is our use case and life cycle. So this ties into this defining the first useful API release. And Alad made the point, well, didn't we already agree firewall was our first use case? And maybe, but we may have been naive at that about that. Because again, we're using the information we have at the time, and we need to adjust. So if we don't have, again, we have to have some more people contributing to hit critical mass, and so we can have, expand the maintainers roster a little bit. Right? We lost Kyle. We need a replacement, but that comes with some commitments. So what do we do here? Again, technical steering committee, you guys are all members of it. What do we want to do here? Do you guys see the commitment improving? Again, I see it improving, at least in terms of the participation and the activity and the kinds of discussions in the working group meetings. But what else can we do? We said this for a couple of months in these calls, and I said it in the board. Again, we've got some promises, but we haven't really seen the result yet. So what do we need to do to improve that? Do we need a more concrete definition of a use case? Do we need a more concrete definition of a first release with some target dates for motivation? What do we need to do? From other member companies or our general members as well. Tim, I saw you come off of mute.
Yeah, I just think that the silence you're getting, means we don't have a lot of great ideas at this moment on how to kick it up a gear.
All right, let me ask a different related question then. Is this, I mean, is this an issue for us? Oh, Venkat, go ahead.
Yeah, I think we kind of discussed this a while back. This maybe is something that we need to go to the board and ask. I think these are the folks hopefully signing off this budget. It may be about budget and allocation of people and whatnot. If we don't have, even if we go with use case and make some more progress, if we don't have at least one person, right? Even if that one person is working partially, at least 50% of the time, it'll become hard as a group to move forward on, doing things. At this point, I see as like when OPI is Boris, Boris is OPI at this point, right? And then no disrespect to Mircha, who is he's also slowly coming up and helping with some test cases and some testing related things. So unless I somehow feel it's a board thing, and I think it's something we need to go and discuss as a TSC, saying we need each member company to have at least one name. While we may not want them to be like approving code and whatnot, but we may need that group from officially signing off on few things to get. Like we are voting here on the technical issues. So on the code related issues, we need to have somebody to also sign off to say, hey, this is okay. So maybe it's something we should take to the board and discuss there and explicitly hear out each company and their representative, what their view is.
Yeah, other thoughts?
Yeah, I think the progress we're making in the OPI API will help also other groups, because I'm hearing some groups, yeah, we have defined this in deployment, we have defined this in groups, but until we are aligned on a basic thing on the API, it's difficult also to structure the other group. We have some dependencies between the group. We have also some dependencies between use case on API, because based on the basic API, the use case will describe, but use case should be generic, but it's why when we have a minimum of in every group, it will accelerate the thing. And it's why also from our side, we have also added more people to really contribute also. And we hope that it should be concrete soon.
Yeah, and like I say, I do see the engagement in the API working group. I've attended the last couple in the life cycle as well. I do see that engagement and the quality of the discussion improving considerably. And again, I have promises from people that there are people coming. And so what it sounds like is what this sounds like is we're not in a great place, but we should be continuing to improve. And when we hit critical mass, we can end up in a good place. And critical mass, there's a fair amount of there's leading indicators that say that that's coming, especially to your point, Erwin, right? That the agreement in the API group will help drive actual additional people typing in APIs and code and committing that. And I think there's a lot of truth to that. Elad?
So I think that, again, when I look at us, I see a startup. And yes, we don't have a lot of resources. And yes, we'll have to focus extremely well on what we're doing. And the first thing a startup needs is focus. The second thing it needs is clients. So from my point of view, I'm always thinking, how do we get to a client commit quickly? Meaning that a deployment partner that is saying, yes, if you do ABC, I'm going to deploy this. And then comes the focus, because for me, we have to focus on something that's very tangible. So I looked at the people that we have as members, and I said, we have firewall experts. I mean, we have F5. Sorry to put F5 on the spot here, but those are the experts that we have in application. And I said, let's focus on that and actually build something out of it, because if we have F5 and we have people like Boris that know provisioning very well, and we have some people that know how to play around with the APIs that we need, how to build them. So we actually have a very small but perfect storm. So if we can agree on just taking, a firewall, and that was my initial thought, just taking a basic firewall and showing to the market, showing to our deployment partners that we're serious and this is how we execute. Here is the piece of software from F5. Here are the APIs around it. Here's the provisioning around it. Voila, you have a tiny little firewall. It could be just a very basic firewall, but at least we're showing the full process going through. Then you get more interest, then you get more companies joining and interested in pitching in, and then you get more people just coming in and helping. So it's sort of chicken and egg, right? But
Sure.
At least I think I have the right notion of where to start.
Okay, so to do that, we need to know from somebody what all components would go into a firewall. What are all the things that are necessary to do what you say, Alad? What are the components? What's the architecture to do that?
Exactly, and we have experts. Luckily for us, we have experts that are members that know how to do that.
But we need a concrete proposal that says, here's what we shall do, and then we agree on it. Erwan, go ahead.
No, just but also I think we have expert of firewall. I think it's good to start building something, but the key topic also is to start on. We have also some final users Boris has shared, for example, a recording of Verizon in the deployment group, and I think they will also make a new presentation, perhaps this week or next week. It should not also be the vendor. It's why we should always also use. We had some contribution of Bell Canada of over final use case on. The ideal thing is the final when you Elad, you were speaking of a startup. The goal is to sell or to have a product for final user. And we have also some final users. So the ideal chain is a final user, expert contributing on this feature. Getting this final user, and it's a role of a use case group to collect this.
Yeah. Again, fair points. All right. Any other comments on engagement and use case definition?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lurking problem there, Joe, where you bring something forward like a firewall, right? That's an F5 product, right? So F5 isn't going to contribute their firewall code to the project. So how do we do that, right? How do you host a third-party proprietary product as part of your use case? I mean, that's actually what I hear customers like Comcast and Verizon saying. They want the OPI ecosystem to allow them to deploy third-party products on these DPUs.
Right. Alad?
That's exactly my point. Meaning that Tim just made my point. That what we need to do is to allow an environment in which a container or a VM, probably a container, given the focus, of a third party could come in and deploy. And that third party will have to work with us, or at least work with within the guidelines of what the API should be and what the provisioning should be. But we are actually providing the fertile ground for that container to go in. I'm not saying we build a firewall. I'm saying and I'm not expecting firewall code to be contributed, just the other way around. I'm expecting us to have some engine that is a black box that could come from any vendor and could go on the DPUs. And all we're doing is making sure that it knows how to talk to the upper layers, knows how to talk to the outside for provisioning. So no matter where you take, again, just as an example, the F5 container, if it's an Intel, if it's an NVIDIA, if it's a Marvell, it'll work exactly the same as far as provisioning and northbound. That's the whole concept, isn't it?
Yeah, but in the OPI group, we've only just begun to discuss Kubernetes. And recently the conversation has had the Kubernetes on the host, not on the DPU card. So we're
I
just
agree.
starting to
and
get to
that's-
that conversation in the API group.
I agree. That's why I put it as one of my main points when I asked the team here the question, because I asked Red Hat, what do you focus on? And they said 100% OpenShift. I asked them for the DPU or for the host. They said both, meaning for the DPU 100%. For the host, it could be something else, but for the DPU, definitely OpenShift. So if that's the case, then we should be focusing on Kubernetes.
Yes, I agree.
Yeah, and that is another proposal that's come in. Stephen, go ahead.
Yeah, so just a couple of things. I think I agree pretty much with everything that you said, Elad. I do want to add just a little bit more to that, a little bit of context from what we were talking about way back when we started this. So we had Tim Worsley from F5 and I were proposing that F5 bring forward an open source firewall. And it was key to be open source as our first use case for OPI, so that it was something that anyone could deploy. It didn't mean that someone had to go out and buy a product in order to try it out, right? And so I do think that it's important that we be able to support, third-party products in this environment. That's absolutely important. But I do think that the first one should be open source.
So if we want to take open source, it doesn't have to be the F5 firewall, and it doesn't have to be any version of the F5 firewall. And there's plenty of security tools that are open source. Nginx has a free version. PFSense has a free version. There's plenty of those guys around that we can select that are already ready. My point is that we need to clearly define what are we actually going to build on the DPU IPU. If we're going to build a framework and allow third-party, again, containers/VMs, and then that's what we should focus on. And if we start doing an open source firewall, again, there are some that are ready, we might skew off that trend. And again, we don't have the resources.
Yeah, I like the suggestion of using the Nginx as an OSS platform. Can do load balancing, it can do proxy, reverse proxy, and it has some security firewall-like features as well.
So it sounds like there's a couple of different useful proposals people could assemble, i.e. write down and bring forward for discussion, review, and then likely voting. And now we have and so again, that's what we need, right? We need the TSC members to bring forward additional proposals. Boris, go ahead.
First of all, really good conversation, finally, right? So the F5 running on the DPUs versus the Nginx. Finally, we're focusing ourselves on the real products and we're talking about real issues. So I'm really happy that we are forcing those issues and starting to talk about them instead of, renaming XPU and stuff. But my problem is, okay, we did exactly what you say, Elad and others, for storage. We brought an open source project, which is called SPDK. We're running inside containers on the DPU. We show real value with emulating and exposing NVMe devices. And we have all that code up and running with 3 vendors, with having their proprietary plugins already implemented. And now what? There is no progression, no ownership. Nobody's taking responsibility. Nobody is taking it anywhere. So what I feel is going to happen is we're going to build Nginx, let's say, use case with firewall. We're going to put it on DPUs and nobody will consume it again. What's the point?
I do not agree, because also, at least from our side, Red Hat, we are not focusing now on storage or just doing experimentation, but we have a lot of expectation on OPI, and also a lot of customer demanding on OPI, also on network. And also after, we want to also provide this to our platform. So, and after this example of Nginx, if you look in all communities, when we'll have some CI potentially or some testing of the API, if we have some code, we need also to have some samples that will run in the CI. And because of license problem, this Nginx thing will stay for years as one of, if also we have like, with a last proposal, we can do service function chaining, we can start to test something with two function, one firewall, on one load balancer. And for me, this thing will, it's also good that it's simple, like a simple Nginx, because it's really easy to deploy. It could be used also for the testing, everything. So it's the same. See, if for storage it has been done without the goal to after enable this on platforms, it stay like this. But the goal is really to use these things for real production quickly.
I would like to add to what Erwin said, and I agree with him. There's a big difference between SPDK and Nginx. If I go out to Verizon and I say, I have an SPDK implementation, they'll say, great, what does it connect to? If I go and say, I've got an Nginx implementation, they say, great, let's deploy it and try it out. That's the difference, component versus solution.
I don't listen a lot. It's a solution, right? You connect to storage, and we have tons of good storages out there.
Yes, but connect to what storage? A complete solution would be NVMe over TCP solving a specific problem. That would be a complete solution. Just taking SPDK, you solved the pipeline, but it's not connecting to an actual application.
It is. What are you talking about? It is.
Yeah, but Boris, you need to take that application, combine it together, and then be able to offer it as something. Again, if you cannot deploy turnkey, it's not an application as far as our clients are concerned. What would Verizon do with SPDK? They need to bring something else to it, right? They need to connect something to it. Where Nginx, it gives them a service from day one. Do you understand what I'm getting at?
No, but we can take it off.
Let me see if I can help. I think what I hear a lot saying is, if you have NVMe over TCP as part of your SDK, but you haven't connected it to a box that supports the target side of the equation, you don't have the complete solution. Is that what I'm hearing?
In a way, yes.
But we have a lot of boxes that implement NVMe TCP target. Huge amount. Pick and
Right,
choose.
but have you
Dell
tested?
EMC, IBM, whatever you want.
But have you tested with them? Have you
Yes.
said, I've tested this, this is all
Yes.
functional. I can
Yes.
stand behind it.
Yes. I tested with several solutions out there for real storage, end-to-end, all is working.
So we asked Verizon explicitly what it would take for them to, start actually, looking at it and to be able to deploy it and try it out. And their answer was it needed to be integrated with Kubernetes. Right. So they needed OpenShift to be able to do something with it. It's not something that they would take directly.
I agree. So deploying the Nginx as a container doesn't make sense. So what we need to start first is deploying the Kubernetes on DPUs before we go into the applications. True? Steven?
Probably. So the only hesitation I have for that is that for someone like Verizon to take it, I think that is true. They would want to see it integrated into, OpenShift, OpenStack, something like that, right? but I do think we would potentially have more opportunities around an Nginx container that doesn't require full Kubernetes. But I do agree completely that we need to focus on getting Kubernetes defined and working here. I do think that should be a focus area.
And let's say we deploy Nginx. Okay, what do we do now? We define APIs for Nginx. That doesn't make sense. We deploy plugins at how Nginx uses the hardware accelerators. We need to define what exactly we're doing by deploying Nginx on the DPUs.
Yeah, well, that would be the work. That would be the work that needs to be done. But again, we have to know that that would be useful to define, and then you do exactly what you just said. You know how to do the job. I know you do. So then you go and say, here's the stuff that has to be defined to make that work in a consistent way across DPUs. And you don't have to redefine what an Nginx-based firewall itself does, because it's already got its own definitions and so on. You just have to make that accessible when it's deployed on a DPU. And then all the things it needs to take advantage of the acceleration and the ARM cores, you define all the pieces for that. And what we've been saying, and what seems to be true, is that that set of things translates to other applications as well. So you start with one, get that going, you go, okay, here's all the stuff we had to define for that. For storage, again, we know a lot, Boris sort of did that for base storage access. We know that works. We know the APIs work because they were, we tried them, as Dell. So we know those work. Now, are they complete? Not 100% sure they're complete, but so it's not like we don't have any use cases. I think the problem we have, again, is we need more variety, more people working on this stuff. To Erwin's point, we've got the initial kick for that now in the working groups, right? And what I presume is that when the working groups kind of reach a conclusion, it'll get written up and brought here for review and agreement and ratification.
I disagree, Joe. I think we need to restructure the TSC calls. We need to talk about those issues like we're discussing in the past 5-10 minutes. Well, let's say we deploy Nginx container. What do we do with that, right? We need to define it here on the TSC calls. Then we can go in the API work group and try to find out exactly or figure out how to do it. But what to do, I think, needs to be defined here. Are we focusing ourselves how to even deploy containers on the DPUs? I think we must. Before talking to real applications, I think the first problem that we need to solve is, okay, you have a controller, you have a container, how you actually deploy it into DPUs?
But for me, deployment is not the first thing. It's more what are the interfaces to configure your DPU on. Because deploying, you have many ways on the, but for me, API is really the API, what is ruling, how we interact. So it could be interact externally to define what we want to run, which function should be enabled, and potentially also internal API about the different accelerators. I think it's two main things. And it's what has been shared in the Slack on the mailing list, trying to show what are the point of the API. On 2 weeks ago, we have presented for the API, we have presented some proposals. So where is the API for me is really the key point, on focus on do with a proper order the APIs.
Yeah, but the API we have spent a lot of time on is this cloud use case, which I think is brought in because it's already been developed and in use, right? It's being brought to OPI as a largely complete thing. But
yeah, but
we don't really have the API on how to deploy a Kubernetes and a CNI on the DPU, nor do we have APIs on how to get something like Nginx once deployed to establish its networking controls, right, on top of the DPU and to the host and to the outside world. that's a use case that we could focus on, maybe, that would bring a lot of clarity to how to deploy at least an infrastructure networking application on top of the DPU.
But let's say we go with F5, Tim, just for an example, right? So let's say we deploy the F5 either as container or a pod in the Kubernetes on side the DPU. What would you like the API group to help you with from F5 perspective? Are you looking for northbound APIs, how people configure F5? Probably not. You already have that. What do you need? You need how F5 is talking inside the DPU to different hardware components to configure networking and other and firewall rules, policies. What API can help? What OPI can help F5 once we deploy F5 inside DPUs? I don't understand myself, so I need clarity.
Yeah, I think the starting point is, how do we establish the base networking connectivity, right?
Mm.
How do we steer the traffic?
From inside,
Particularly if some of the
F5 container.
the F5 container needs to configure elements of the DPU to establish, a networking management interface, to establish a data path for traffic. And it might need to, some of that traffic might need to go straight to the host and bypass the application.
Some DPUs using P4, some DPUs have OVS, so there are a lot of varieties. So what you're looking for is to commonize how F5 container running inside DPUs talking to all the different data planes in order to configure the network connectivity.
Right. So if I say, hey, if I want this MAC to traffic to this MAC or this IP should come to me, and traffic to this other IP should go straight to the host.
Mm.
And maybe traffic to this IP needs to go back onto the network with this modification.
So it's like all the external plumbing, and after you can work off inside how
Right.
to run.
But
But
then once the application has networking, it can do its job, right? And it's not really OPI's business to say what its job is.
But it's why also so I think I agree with you. And it's our problem, the connection with the host and how we connect to this switch. So this thing, how do you call it, Boris? Because for me, it's an API that is you are configuring this like it's an external API of you see a DPU as a block and you are asking to enable this connection. And for me, the things that are more internal, like if we want to leverage different frameworks for acceleration, this is more internal. And here it's more how to connect the DPU with external world.
I think we're running out of time here, Joe.
We are out of time, but we will, okay. So we have a couple of quick reviews next week, and then we'll pick up here and try to get some more clarity on what we should be driving in the working groups. So thank you very much, everyone. The notes are posted. Vivian, are you moving?